In a cave in northern Iraq in 1960, archaeologists uncovered something that stopped the excavation completely. A Neanderthal burial site, approximately 60,000 years old. Not unusual by itself. Neanderthal burials had been found before. What stopped them was the soil. Surrounding the skeleton, the pollen record showed evidence of flowers. Not one species. 8, including yarrow, groundsel, and grape hyacinth. Plants that don't grow in caves, plants that would have had to be deliberately gathered and placed. Someone 60,000 years ago buried their dead with flowers, not for survival, not for any practical reason, because something in them said that the person lying in the ground mattered, that the moment of their leaving deserved to be marked, that death was not simply an ending, but something that required a response. Nobody told them to do this. There was no religious institution instructing the behavior, no written tradition passed down through generations. Just a group of humans, or near humans, standing over someone they had lost, deciding, in whatever wordless way such decisions get made, that flowers were the right thing, that the dead deserve something beautiful. And that impulse, that reaching toward meaning in the face of loss, is one of the oldest things we know about the creatures that became us. The way a culture treats its dead tells you almost everything about what that culture believes about being alive, and what the archaeological record of human burial practices reveals, across tens of thousands of years, across cultures with no contact with each other, across species that weren't even fully human yet, is a picture of something both stranger and more moving than most people expect. It reveals a species that from almost the very beginning refused to treat death as simply the end of a body. A species that insisted again and again across every culture and every era that the person who had been there still mattered, that their going required ceremony, that the living owed something to the dead that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with meaning. The earliest confirmed intentional burial in the archaeological record dates to roughly 100,000 years ago. A child buried in a shallow grave in a cave in Israel with a deer jawbone placed carefully beside the skull. Nobody knows why the jawbone was there. Nobody will ever know. But it was placed deliberately. The positioning makes that clear. By someone who had a reason, even if that reason existed only in the emotional and symbolic vocabulary of a mind we can no longer access. The child was buried. Something was left with them, and someone stood over that grave and felt whatever it is humans feel when they realize that the world continues and the person they loved does not. From that moment forward, the archaeological record of human burial becomes increasingly complex, increasingly deliberate, and increasingly astonishing. By 30,000 years ago, burials across Europe and Asia show evidence of extraordinary care. Bodies positioned in specific orientations, many facing east toward the sunrise, grave goods placed with apparent intentionality, tools, jewelry, animal bones, ochre pigment spread across the body in red. The Sunghir burial site in Russia, dated to approximately 34,000 years ago, contains 2 children buried head to head, covered in thousands of individually drilled mammoth ivory beads that would have taken an estimated 10,000 hours of labor to produce. 10,000 hours for 2 children. In a world where every waking hour was a negotiation with survival, someone decided that this was where those hours should go, that dressing the dead in something beautiful was worth more than almost anything else those hours could have produced. Think about what that means practically. A group of humans 34,000 years ago with no agricultural surplus, no stored food, no safety net of any kind, chose to spend the equivalent of 5 full years of a single person's working life making beads for a burial. Not weapons, not shelter, not food storage, beads for children who would never wear them again. In any purely economic analysis, this makes no sense, which is precisely the point. The people who made those beads were not operating within a purely economic analysis. They were operating within something else, a framework of meaning that insisted the dead deserved beauty, that the act of adorning someone for burial was worth the cost. that the relationship between the living and the dead carried obligations that transcended survival calculation entirely. This pattern, the investment of extraordinary time, labor, and resources in burial ritual, appears across every human culture ever studied without exception. No human society has ever been documented that does not practice some form of deliberate treatment of the dead. This is, anthropologists note, one of the closest things to a human universal that exists, more consistent across cultures than marriage, more consistent than religion in any specific form, more consistent than almost any behavioral practice you could name. Humans bury or burn or expose or preserve their dead, always deliberately, always with ceremony, always with some form of meaning attached to the process. The specific form varies enormously. The impulse never does. What was driving it? Researchers have proposed several explanations, and most of them are probably partially right. Burial prevents disease, practical enough. Marking graves helps living groups remember where their people are, territorially useful. Ritual around death may reinforce social bonds among the surviving group, strengthening cohesion at the moment of maximum vulnerability. All of these are plausible. None of them fully explains 10,000 hours of ivory beads for 2 children in Ice Age Russia. None of them explains flowers in a cave. None of them explains the consistent cross-cultural tens of thousands of years pattern of humans insisting that the dead are owed something that has nothing to do with practical benefit and everything to do with love. The most honest explanation may be the simplest one. Humans from almost the very beginning were unable to treat the people they loved as simply gone. The body was there, but the person, the specific irreplaceable presence of a particular human being who had been known and needed and depended upon, felt like it required acknowledgement that went beyond disposal. Something in the human mind, perhaps the same capacity for symbolic thinking that produced language and art and religion, refused to accept that death simply ended the relationship. The grave goods weren't sent with the dead because anyone rationally believed they could be used. They were sent because the relationship required a gesture, because leaving someone with nothing felt like a failure of something important, because love, it turns out, doesn't stop at the boundary of death. It just changes what it can do. You carry this. Every funeral you've attended, every grave you've stood beside, every moment you felt the particular weight of someone's absence in a world that keeps moving without them. That experience connects you directly to the humans who placed flowers in a cave 60,000 years ago. The grief is the same. The impulse to mark it, to honor it, to refuse to let the leaving go unacknowledged, that is the same too. It has always been the same. Because whatever we are, whatever combination of biology and culture and circumstance made us, we have always been the kind of creature that stands over the ones we've lost and reaches for something beautiful to leave behind. We have been doing it since before we were fully human. We will almost certainly be doing it long after everything else about us has changed. Because some things, it turns out, are more fundamental than survival, and the refusal to let the people we love simply disappear without ceremony is one of the oldest of them.